Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. This time we're really diving deep into how learners form their understanding of scientific concepts.
It's like building a mental model of the world, right?
Exactly. And today we're focusing specifically on biology students.
And a rather interesting case study, water intoxication.
Water intoxication. Okay, now that sounds a bit paradoxical.
Right. You wouldn't think that drinking too much water could be a problem.
Exactly. Isn't water essential for, well, pretty much everything?
It is, but like many things in biology, it's all about balance.
So too much of a good thing can actually be bad.
That's the idea that study explores, and they use a pretty captivating real-world scenario to do it.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
So imagine a football player named Zyres. Picture him pushing himself to the limit during practice, intense exercise under the hot sun.
Oh, I can already feel the dehydration setting in.
Exactly. And of course, what does Zyres do? He reaches for his water bottle. To stay hydrated, he drinks and drinks and drinks, maybe even some Gatorades in the mix.
Okay, so we've got intense exercise and excessive water consumption. What's the problem here?
Well, this is where things get interesting. The study, titled "He Drank Too Much Gatorade," looks at how this seemingly harmless act can lead to a dangerous condition: water intoxication.
Okay, so that's where the title of the study comes from. He drank too much Gatorade. Clever.
Right. It definitely grabs your attention. So the study focuses on an undergraduate biology class in Canada.
Gotcha. So we're looking at how these students are learning about this concept of water intoxication.
Exactly. The researchers gave them a written assignment based on Zyres' story. They had to analyze how his actions, the intense exercise, and all that water could lead to brain damage.
Brain damage. Wow. Okay, things just got serious. This is a lot more than just a little tummy ache from too much water.
Right. It highlights the seriousness of the condition. So the students were given a diagram from their textbook showing the role of ADH, a key hormone in water regulation.
ADH, antidiuretic hormone, right? It's involved in how our kidneys reabsorb water.
Exactly. And here's the catch. The students hadn't specifically studied ADH before this assignment.
Oh, so they're having to apply their existing knowledge of biology and figure this out on the fly.
Precisely. It's a real test of their scientific reasoning skills. And get this, the assignment will be rated on a 7-point scale.
Okay, so how did they do? Were these future doctors acing it?
Well, the results were pretty spread out. About 30% scored quite low, 55% were somewhere in the middle, and only 15% really nailed it.
So a real mix of understanding across the board. That's interesting. It's not like everyone got it completely right or wrong.
And that's actually what makes this study so fascinating. It suggests that there isn't one right way for students to make sense of this information.
Yeah, like even with the same textbook and the same diagram, everyone's coming at it with their own unique perspective.
Exactly. And that's where the idea of learner conceptions comes in.
Learner conceptions. So not errors or misconceptions, but conceptions.
Right. It emphasizes that these students are actively constructing their own understanding. They're not just empty vessels waiting to be filled with facts.
I like that. It's like they're building their own mental models of how this all works.
Precisely. And those models might not always perfectly align with the scientific truth, but they provide valuable insights into how learning happens.
So the researchers are trying to understand the reasoning behind the students' responses, not just label them as right or wrong.
Exactly. And to do this, they analyze something called thematic patterns in the students' writing.
Thematic patterns sounds a bit like literary analysis.
It's similar, but instead of looking for themes in a novel, they're looking for themes in how the students are connecting ideas and concepts together through language.
So like how they're explaining the relationship between exercise, sweating, ADH, and ultimately brain damage.
You got it. It's about understanding the underlying logic of their explanations, even if it doesn't perfectly match the scientific explanation.
I see. So it's like revealing the hidden framework of their thinking.
Think of it like this. When we define photosynthesis, we say something like, plants use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to create oxygen and energy in the form of sugar, right?
Yeah, that's the basic gist of it.
But each part of that sentence is connected to the others in a specific way, forming a sort of conceptual map.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection. So by analyzing the thematic patterns in the students' writing, the researchers can uncover how they're mentally mapping out this process of water intoxication.
Precisely. It's like piecing together the puzzle of their understanding. And what they found was truly fascinating.
Oh, I bet. So what were some of the key themes or patterns that emerged from the students' explanations? What did they have to say about Zyres and his overhydration mishap?
Well, they identified 4 main stages in the biological process as the students understood it, starting with the intense exercise itself.
Okay, so that's our starting point. Zyres pushing himself to the limit on the football field. What did the students have to say about the biological effects of all that exertion?
Well, some students focused on the physical exertion, describing how the molecules in Zeri's body would be moving faster, generating heat, and creating a kind of internal chaos.
Like a molecular mosh pit.
Haha, yeah, something like that. For example, one student wrote, the molecules and compound in the body would move faster, which then would increase the body temperature.
Okay, I can see how they're trying to connect the physical act of exercise to what's happening at a molecular level.
Right. And then, of course, we move on to sweating.
Ah, yes, sweating. Our body's natural way of cooling down. I imagine this is where ADH, our water-regulating hormone, comes into play.
You got it. But this is also where we start to see a wider range of learner conceptions, particularly around the role of ADH.
So how are the students understanding how this hormone works?
Well, some students imagined ADH acting like a key, opening up those aquaporins.
Aquaporins, those are the channels that let water pass through cell membranes, right?
Exactly. While others saw ADH more as a trigger, like it's triggering or even inserting these aquaporins.
So they're creating these different mental images of how this hormone is interacting with these tiny cellular structures.
It's like they're trying to visualize a process they can't actually see.
I'm not always getting it quite right, scientifically speaking.
Right, but it highlights their effort to make sense of this complex biological process using whatever mental models they have available.
I see. So we've got the intense exercise, the sweating, and of course the water loss that comes with it. What were some of the ideas the students had about the effects of losing water through sweat?
Well, this is where things get interesting because a lot of students focused on the idea of salt concentrations.
Okay, salt concentrations make sense. Our bodies need a certain balance of electrolytes, right?
Exactly. But some students were thinking about salt levels increasing in the body as a whole, while others were thinking about it more specifically inside the cells.
So are we talking about like a difference in scale? Like the overall saltiness of the body versus the saltiness inside individual cells?
Precisely. And this subtle difference in their thinking reveals a lot about how they're understanding the movement of water and how it affects different compartments within the body.
Right, because where the salt goes, water follows. So if they're thinking about salt building up in the cells, they might imagine water rushing in to dilute it.
Exactly. And this brings us to the final stage, water consumption. What happens when Xyres drinks all that water after intense exercise and sweating?
Okay, this is where the water intoxication really kicks in, right? What kind of conceptions do the students have about this part of the process?
Well, some students describe the water literally flowing into the body, sometimes diluting substances in the blood. Others focused on the Gatorade, imagining it as adding salt directly to the body.
Adding salt directly. Not quite how sports drinks work, but I can see the logic there.
Right. And then you had some students who used language that evoked drowning, like water kept getting consumed by blood cells.
Conserved by blood cells. That's a fascinating way to put it. It's like they're seeing this influx of water as something that overwhelms the body's natural processes.
Exactly. These responses provide a glimpse into how the students are connecting this scientific concept to their own understanding of the world.
It's amazing to see how these learner conceptions can be so diverse, so creative, even if they're not always perfectly aligned with the scientific model.
And that's what makes the study so valuable. It's not about judging these conceptions as right or wrong. It's about understanding the process of learning itself.
So it's like these conceptions are clues guiding us towards better teaching and learning strategies.
Exactly. And this study highlights some key factors that contribute to how students form their understanding, like the teacher's pedagogical choices.
Ah, so how the material is presented can really influence how students interpret it?
Absolutely. And then there's the role of everyday experience, like those Gatorade moments.
It's like our brains are constantly trying to bridge the gap between what we learn in the classroom and what we experience in the real world.
And then there's the nature of biological reasoning itself, which can be particularly challenging for learners.
Yeah, biology is all about these complex interactions, these interconnected systems.
Exactly. So we're starting to see that there's a lot more to understanding learner conceptions than meets the eye.
This is shaping up to be a truly fascinating deep dive. So we've got all these fascinating learner conceptions about water intoxication.
Right, these different ways students are making sense of what happened to Xyres.
But I'm curious, what can we actually learn from these conceptions? It's not like we're trying to say, gotcha, you got it wrong.
Exactly. It's not about right or wrong, but about understanding the process of learning.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we use these conceptions to actually improve science education?
Well, this study highlights 3 key factors that contribute to how these conceptions are formed.
3 factors. Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with them.
So the first factor is something the researchers call the teacher's pedagogical cut.
Teacher's pedagogical cut. Sounds a bit like a fancy culinary term.
It does, doesn't it? But it basically means that the way the assignment was designed, how it was presented, influenced how the students thought about it.
So the teacher's choices, even subtle ones, can have a big impact on how the students learn.
Absolutely. In this case, the assignment really zeroed in on the role of ADH.
Which makes sense. ADH is key to understanding water regulation.
It is, but the assignment didn't really give a lot of context about water intoxication as a whole.
So it's like they were given a piece of the puzzle without seeing the whole picture.
A great way to put it. And then there's the language used, like the word Gatorade, in the prompt itself.
So that might have encouraged some students to think about their own experiences with sports drinks.
Exactly, instead of thinking about it purely from a scientific perspective.
So even the attempt to make the scenario relatable could backfire a bit.
It's a delicate balance, for sure. Which brings us to the second factor, knowledge transfer from daily life.
This is where those Gatorade adds salt conceptions come in, right?
Exactly. It's natural for us to try and connect what we learn in the classroom to our everyday experiences.
It's like our brains are always searching for those connections, those familiar hooks.
And sometimes those connections can lead us astray, scientifically speaking.
Like that student who said water blocked blood vessels in the brain. They were probably thinking about a clogged pipe or something.
Makes sense, right? It's a familiar concept that they're applying to a more complex biological process.
I see. So it's not that they're not thinking. They're just using the tools they have available, even if those tools aren't always the right ones for the job.
Exactly. And then there's the third factor, which is more about the nature of biology itself.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What makes biological reasoning so unique?
Well, think about it. Biological processes are incredibly complex, right? You've got different levels of organization, from molecules to cells to organs to the whole organism.
And all these things are interacting with each other in these intricate ways.
Exactly. So it's not just about knowing the individual parts, it's about understanding the relationships between them, the order of events, where things happen in the body.
It's like a multidimensional puzzle where the pieces are constantly moving and changing.
That's a great analogy. And this study found that students often struggle with three specific aspects of biological reasoning: relationality, temporality, and locality.
Okay, break those down for me.
So relationality is about understanding the subtle but important differences between different biological terms.
So, like how water isn't exactly the same as H2O in a biological context.
Exactly. Students might use these terms interchangeably, but in science, those distinctions matter.
Right. It's like needing a whole new vocabulary to talk about biology.
Then there's temporality, which is understanding the sequence of events.
So knowing what happens first, second, third in a biological process.
Precisely. And students might skip steps in their explanations, leading to incomplete or inaccurate conclusions.
Like jumping straight from ADH to waterly absorption without considering all the steps in between.
Exactly. And finally, there's locality, which is about understanding where in the body these processes are happening.
So like knowing the difference between what's going on inside a cell versus outside in the bloodstream.
Precisely. And this can be tricky because sometimes students mix up those locations, which can really muddy their understanding of the process.
It's like they're missing the spatial dimension of biology, like they're trying to understand a 3D world by looking at a 2D map.
Another great analogy. And these three challenges, relationality, temporality, and locality, they all contribute to the complexity of biological reasoning.
Wow, this is really insightful. It's like we're starting to peel back the layers of how students learn, how they make sense of these intricate biological processes.
And the more we understand these processes, the better equipped we are to help them learn effectively.
It's like we're gaining a new appreciation for the challenges and the triumphs of learning science.
And remember, it's not just about the students. It's about all of us, how we all grapple with complex information and try to make sense of the world around us.
Absolutely. So where do we go from here? What are some practical takeaways from this research? What can we actually do with this knowledge? Okay, so we've talked about these learner conceptions and the factors that shake them, but where do we go from here?
Well, the exciting thing is this isn't just some abstract academic study.
Right. We want to actually use this knowledge to improve science education.
Absolutely. And one of the big takeaways is the need for explicit instruction in scientific reasoning.
So we can't just assume that students will naturally pick up these complex skills.
Right, especially in a field like biology, where it's all about these intricate relationships and processes.
It's like we need to give them the tools and the guidance to build those mental models, those conceptual maps we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. And it's not just about the content itself, it's also about the language we use.
So being clear and precise with scientific terminology.
Exactly. Remember those interchangeable words: water, H2O, fluid, solid.
Right. In everyday language, they might seem similar, but in science, those subtle distinctions matter.
Absolutely. So helping students understand of distinctions, those nuances of scientific language, is crucial.
So it's like we're not just teaching them the facts, we're teaching them how to think like scientists.
Precisely. And the study even suggests that activities where students have to translate between everyday language and scientific language can be really helpful.
That's interesting. So, like, taking a concept they're familiar with, maybe something from their own experience.
Like Gatorade, right?
Exactly. And then guiding them towards a more scientifically accurate understanding.
It's all about making those connections, building those bridges between the familiar and the unfamiliar.
And speaking of connections, we talked about the premise reasoning outcome models that the teachers used in this study.
The pro model, right?
Yeah, it seems like a valuable tool, but is there anything we need to be cautious about when using it?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that it can sometimes lead to a very linear way of thinking.
So it's important to encourage students to think outside the box, to consider multiple perspectives, to be okay with revising their understanding as they learn more.
Absolutely. Science isn't always about finding the one right answer. It's about embracing the messiness, the uncertainty, the process of inquiry itself.
It's like we're not just teaching them what to think, we're teaching them how to think.
Precisely. And that's how we cultivate those critical thinking skills, the ability to analyze evidence, to construct arguments, to really engage in meaningful scientific discourse.
So what does all this mean for our listeners, those of us who might not be in a biology classroom, but are still fascinated by science and how we learn?
Well, it's an invitation to think about your own experiences with learning. Have you ever struggled with a concept that seemed simple at first but turned out to be more complex than you imagined?
Oh, absolutely. I think we've all been there.
And have you ever noticed how your own personal experiences, those everyday Gatorade moments, have shaped your understanding of scientific ideas?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. We all come to science with our own unique perspectives and experiences.
And recognizing that, understanding where those perspectives come from, is the first step towards becoming more effective learners.
It's like we're all on this lifelong journey of learning and discovery.
And it's okay to make mistakes along the way. Those are just opportunities to learn and grow.
As we wrap up this deep dive, what's one final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with?
How about this? The next time you encounter a scientific idea that challenges your understanding, don't shy away from it. Embrace the challenge. Ask questions, explore different perspectives, and who knows, you might even uncover a new learner conception of your own.
What a great way to put it. Like we're all scientists in our own way, constantly observing, questioning, and trying to make sense of the world around us.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of science. It's a never-ending journey of exploration and discovery.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into learner conceptions. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.